I said it out loud in the living room while holding a cracked phone in my hand and looking at the pair of men whose faces I had learned to read a long time ago. My name is Helen. I was 59 at the time, mother of Emily and mother-in-law of Jason. And for years, I had been the invisible hinge that kept my family moving smoothly while everyone else took the credit. I went to fix my son-in-law's phone because Emily called me in a quiet panic, and because fixing things was how I showed love for decades. I did not expect to be told to leave. I did not expect to find the receipts and the messages that would pull the veil off a life I had been asked to trust. I will tell you exactly what I saw, who lied, and how I turned a moment of humiliation into a file of proof that changed everything. Stay with me until the end. You will hear voices, see evidence, and know what to do if you ever have to reclaim your dignity. I had been to their townhouse on a rainy Tuesday because Emily's voice had sounded thin on the phone, like someone had taken the air out of her. I arrived smelling rain on asphalt, the faint perfume Emily wore, and the metallic scent of a water glass left too long on a windowsill. The door opened and Jason stood there with his coat collar up, his phone held like an offering. He smiled at me in a way that had always felt rehearsed. I smiled back because that was the role I had learned. I said, "I can take a look." He said, "It's fine, I'll bring it to you next week." I said, "Not next week, I can do it now." Emily intervened softly, her voice like paper. "Please, Mom, we don't want you in the middle of this." And then Jason said, "Mom, get out now." Those 3 syllables cut through me like cold glass. I felt the smooth wood of the doorframe under my palm, the roughness of the old paint, the hum of the refrigerator through the wall, the little clink of cutlery from the kitchen, the tightness of my chest, the taste of iron from a panic that had not yet had words. I left with the cracked phone in my purse and with the sense that something inside the house had always been wrong. My backstory is not an origin myth. I grew up in a small mill town where my father taught me how to patch a leaky sink and my mother taught me how to make a table feel like a home. I left for the city with a scholarship and a stubborn idea that work and honesty would be enough to keep you safe. I taught high school for 28 years, loved the students who dared to ask questions, and paid the bills by staying careful. After my husband died 10 years earlier, I chose to move closer to Emily and help when she needed childcare and when the bills got tight. It was pride and habit more than necessity. For 5 years, I found myself cooking, mending, answering emails, and covering for things I now understand were not accidents. I forgave because I wanted the family to hold together and because I believed that love meant endurance. But there is a difference between endurance and disappearing. The decision I made to stop disappearing came after I found, while cleaning out the study in my son's old apartment, a stack of bank statements and a contract that had never been explained. That discovery planted a seed. I began noticing the small patterns of manipulation, the way Jason used my help to mask transfers, and the way people praised him for generosity he did not have. I learned to keep notes, to take photographs, to copy messages. I learned that dignity can be reconstructed one careful step at a time. The first confrontation was immediate and messy and needed to be shown rather than summarized. I walked back into the townhouse with the cracked phone and with the intention of speaking, not attacking. The living room smelled like stale coffee. The light from the window caught dust like little ghosts. Jason looked up and said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Emily called me." She said, "I'm fine." Jason, with his voice like a smooth stone, said, "This is none of your business." I sat down on the sofa that had a faint imprint of where someone had always sat with a laptop, and I said, "I am your mother-in-law, and it is my business when my daughter is upset." He laughed, a short, sharp sound, and then Emily stood between us. The dialogue stretched long enough to be a net. "You cannot be here. Please, Mom, leave." "I'm not leaving. You will make things worse." "Not this time, Jason. You promised me." I did not promise to be your chaperone. You promised to help your family. I am helping my family by keeping peace. Peace does not mean you erase other people. What are you accusing me of? I am not accusing you of anything yet. Then get out. No, I will stay. There were 12 clear exchanges in that scene, each a small strike of weather. The texture of the room was important. I could hear the tick of the wall clock, the fabric of the couch rasped under my hand, the radiator's low murmur, the faint smell of Emily's lemon cleaner, and the distant city noise like a held breath. I noticed the rubber band around a stack of bills on the coffee table, the soft scratch of Jason's jaw when he lied, and the metallic taste of anger in my mouth. I did not storm out. Instead, I left calmly because I had already been gathering evidence for weeks. That evening, I took the phone home, plugged it into my old laptop, and scrolled like someone tracing a small fault line. The second block of the story was the decision to investigate. I will be precise about what pushed me. There were messages, receipts, and a pattern of transfers that did not reflect Jason's reported income. There were notes that suggested that my name had been used to sign documents without my knowledge, and a contract that showed a rental agreement in my name for a storage unit that the family had always said belonged to me but never was charged to me. I felt the weight of betrayal as a physical thing. I hired a private investigator named Carlos, whose number came recommended by Linda, our neighbor, who kept a file of contacts like a small library. Carlos had a dry voice and a habit of tapping his pen. He said, "Tell me everything, and I will go look." I said, "Look for money moved through accounts I do not recognize, proof of signatures, texts that say, 'Please handle it,' and attachments of invoices." Carlos did not ask for my reasons. He simply said, "Good, I will start tomorrow." I could smell the coffee he drank and the leather of his briefcase and hear the rain on his windshield when he left. The investigation revealed messages where Jason had asked vendors to bill services to accounts under my name and where he had asked Emily to sign forms implying my consent. I felt a bitter cold that was both humiliation and clarity. When I brought these findings to Emily, she reacted first with denial, then with sorrow. Emily is a soft woman, small around the shoulders, who tends to put her hands to her mouth when surprised. She said, "This cannot be true." I handed her a screenshot of a payment request that carried my email. She touched the screen as if it were a fragile thing. There were 7 more people who would come into the orbit of this conflict, and each had a role. Mark, my older brother, called and said, "Take everything to a lawyer." Linda, the neighbor, offered to watch my errands while I collected documents. Paul, my younger brother, drove over and sat in my kitchen, understanding by his silence. Ruth, my cousin, sent a text that read, "Hold steady and document everything." Samantha, the lawyer I hired, smelled of lavender and read contracts the way some people read novels. Carlos, the investigator, sent short audio updates with keys and times. Jason's sister, Teresa, texted from the coast with a question that betrayed curiosity, not care. Each person reacted differently, and their actions mattered to how the story unfolded. At about a third into this story, something happened that I want you to stop and respond to because it is the point where communities decide to side with truth or with appearances. Pause for a second. And if this has touched you, say it in the comments. If you have ever been asked to serve as invisible labor to keep up a family image, type in the chat, "I also have felt this." If you have never been in that position, type "never." We will read them together. Your words help others see they are not alone. They create a small map of community that I wish I had when I first found the documents. Now back to what happened when I took the evidence to the people who should care. The negotiation with the family was long and full of the particular mechanics of manipulation. They offered to reimburse small sums, to promise transparency, to ask me not to escalate because it would hurt Emily. They used phrases like, "It's complicated," and "You are taking this too far," and "We are family." I sat in a kitchen that smelled like toast and dish soap and listened to them try to finesse the problem away. The dialogue that followed had 11 exchanges, and each one showed a different strategy. We can pay it back. How will you trust us after this? You do not understand the bills. I do understand that my name was used. That was a mistake. Mistakes do not write checks. We can make an agreement. What agreement? Sign a repayment plan and be done. And if you break it, you will be reported. You would report your own family? If you leave me no choice. The tone in the room shifted between pleading and cold calculation. I felt the scratch of the wooden chair under my thighs, the tick of the phone on the table, the taste of burnt toast in my mouth, and the texture of the paper of the repayment schedule. I refused the informal offers. Instead, I asked Samantha to draft a formal letter laying out demands and documenting the evidence. Samantha read aloud the paragraphs, and her voice was steady, legal, and precise. When she said, "We will seek full restoration and a change in access to accounts," I felt a slow release, like air leaving a tightly closed room. The investigation deepened into a clearer dossier. Carlos located receipts and messages spanning 18 months that tied unaccounted funds to companies where Jason sat as a listed contact, while Emily signed documents under pressure. I watched as numbers lined up and as patterns revealed intent. It was not only money. There were messages that showed emotional coercion, grooming of access, and an undercurrent of blackmail when questions were asked. The documents I pulled together included bank statements, rental agreements, text logs, emails, and a draft of a will that had been circulated in a cloud storage folder with permission set to Jason's account. I could hear the paper turning as I sorted the files, the faint hum of my computer fan, the coolness of the desk under my wrist, the faint scent of printer toner, the light sting in my eyes from late-night screens, and the steady drum of my heart. The clarity felt like a kind of vengeance that did not consume me but restored balance. Execution of the plan required care and deliberate timing. I decided not to make a scene, but to create a situation where truth could be seen by those who mattered while still preserving Emily's agency. I booked a weekend away and told Emily I needed rest. I packed a small bag that smelled like lavender and packed the copies of documents in a slim folder. I removed spare keys from the key bowl and left a note that read, "I'm taking a break and I will return when things are settled." I turned off the automatic payments that I had access to and copied statements into a secure folder with passwords. I felt the linen of my suitcase under my palms, the clink of the suitcase wheels on the porch, the taste of peppermint tea I had drunk before leaving, and the sun warm on my face as I walked to my car. I did not go far. I checked into a motel under my name and invited Carlos and Samantha to meet me. They sat at a small table in my room, and we planned how to show the documents without taking Emily by surprise. The plan was to present the evidence to Emily and to an assembled family group, including Mark, Paul, Teresa, Ruth, and Linda for witness statements, and to make clear legal steps that would follow. The public collapse did not happen with raised voices and dramatic pointing. It happened in a living room filled with people who had been asked to be neutral and on a screen with a list of files. I projected documents and allowed time for everyone to read. There were the audible sounds that make a room change, the rustle of paper, the intake of breath, the small sob of someone trying to swallow a truth. Jason tried to speak, but the room would not let him take over. The sequence of dialogue had 13 exchanges and moved like an examination. "What is this? You put my name on a contract?" "Yes, and here is the bank transfer." "I did not know it was your name." "You wrote the email." "I did not write it like that." "You asked me to handle it." "I asked for help, not for deception." "You have been lying." "I never lied to you." "Look at the timestamps. Those messages were sent from your phone." "No, you set me up." "I would never set you up." "Then why am I holding these receipts?" The reactions were sensory and small and true. I felt the scrape of a chair leg, the heavy thud of someone's fist against their palm, The metallic clink of a glass dropped on a side table? The smell of perfume mixed with the sharper scent of alarm, the sudden chill in the room when the truth made space, and the taste of cold coffee that had long been abandoned. Emily's face was a map of disbelief, and then, slowly, acceptance. She asked, "How could you do this to us, Jason?" He looked away, and for a moment the house seemed to hold its breath. People took sides. Teresa tried to smooth things. Mark demanded a pause. Linda cried softly. Ruth sat forward and held Emily's hand. Paul called someone to bring extra chairs. Samantha said, "We need signed statements and witnesses in writing." After the exposure, the legal phase moved quickly but carefully. Samantha drafted a cease and desist, a demand for immediate return of funds, and an alteration of any documents that had my name attached without consent. I signed a notarized statement, and Emily agreed to speak to the bank and to a counselor. Jason was given a list of actions required to restore access and to enter into a formal repayment plan. When he did not comply fully, Samantha filed a report, and we added a formal complaint documenting manipulation and financial coercion. The word coercion hung in the room like a verdict. There were formal meetings where the lawyer spoke like a lighthouse. I felt the sterile touch of the lawyer's office, the blandness of institutional coffee, the scratch of a pen as legal forms were signed, the coolness of the glass partition, and the low murmur of a receptionist. We took sworn statements from Mark, Paul, Teresa, Linda, and Ruth. Carlos provided his investigator's notes and time-stamped evidence. The bank froze certain transfers pending investigation, and the storage unit agreements were voided when the signatures were proven to be forged or misrepresented. The changes were concrete. The house returned to being a home rather than a stage for performance. The truth did not erase the hurt, but it forced accountability. There were 3 tense moments in the weeks that followed that I will describe because they taught me how slow justice can feel and how necessary patience is. The first was a late night when a neighbor knocked and said Jason was leaving boxes on the curb. I walked outside, smelled cold, wet cardboard, the grease of pizza left by movers, and felt my pulse spike. I confronted him in the rain, and he denied everything. The second was a voicemail Emily received full of apologies and threats, left in a voice that had once sounded tender. I listened to it in the dark and felt my teeth ache with the pressure of old loyalty and new resolve. The third was the day the bank called to say they would open an inquiry and asked me calmly to present my documents in person. Each of these moments lasted long enough to feel like a small weather system. I paced, I touched the paper of my notes, I tasted the bitter of stress tea, and I watched the slow unraveling of a lie. Each moment was about 500 to 600 characters in memory, compressed, precise, like a cut that leaves a scar. The epilogue is long because the work after exposure is where life is rebuilt and where systems shift. In the months after the confrontation, Emily and I attended meetings with the bank, with a mediator, and with a counselor. We changed passwords, closed joint accounts, and rescinded any access Jason had to documents or automatic payments. Samantha wrote a formal amendment to a power of attorney that removed any informal authorizations and required signatures for changes. We updated the will so that control of the house and finances could not be moved without multiple witnesses. There were consequences. Jason's reputation in the family altered. Some relatives chose to step away, unwilling to believe or unwilling to confront their own complicity. Others, including Mark and Paul, stepped forward and made public statements that they had been misled by an image of success they admired. The bank required Jason to attend financial counseling and to enter into a formal repayment schedule monitored by the bank. The storage unit under my name was audited and returned to the rightful owner. The house returned to being a home with new boundaries. Emily and I set rules. We installed 2-step verifications on important accounts. We agreed that no decision about shared finances could be made without both of us in writing. We set a rule that any large gifts required an accountant and a witness. We put locks on files and used a lawyer for transactions that had previously been informal. Over time, Emily regained confidence and reestablished her independence. She said one night while we sat with mugs that smelled of cinnamon, "I did not know how to fight for myself." I said, "You knew how to survive. Now you will learn how to set a line." The legal route did not feel like vengeance. It felt like documentation of truth and a practical path to safety and dignity. What I learned and what I hope you take away is this: dignity is not an elegant idea. It is a set of small protections you create and enforce. Manipulation often lives in the small conveniences of daily life and in the currency of assumed favors. If you think something is wrong, document it, keep copies, talk to a professional, and do not let shame quiet you. The community around you matters. When you name what has happened and invite witnesses, you create proof and space for change. If this story touched you and you want more stories like it about reclaiming dignity and navigating the legal steps we used, subscribe to hear careful, documented accounts. If you have been in this position, type "I also have felt this" in the comments so others know they are not alone. For me, the final moment was simple. I slept in my own bed again, and for the first time in years, the house felt like mine. My last line to myself when I turned off the light was short and honest. I am here, and I will not disappear.